They called him the King of Cool, a man who could command the screen with a single glance. But behind Steve McQueen's effortless charm and box office dominance was a man living in chaos. While audiences adored his rebellious swagger and anti-hero roles, Hollywood insiders whispered about something darker. From secret affairs to explosive on-set feuds, McQueen's life behind the scenes was far messier than his polished image suggested. How did a troubled young man from Indiana rise to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars? And what secrets did he take to the grave? Let's dive into the untold story of Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen wasn't just a ladies' man. He was a legend when it came to off-camera romances. His official marriages, first to Neil Adams and later to Ali MacGraw, were well documented. But what the public didn't know was the sheer number of affairs that filled the gaps between and during those marriages. He was rumored to have had flings with some of the most iconic women of the era: Natalie Wood, Faye Dunaway, and even Barbra Streisand. On-set chemistry often spilled into hotel rooms, and McQueen made no effort to deny it. He once said, "I live for myself and answer to nobody." That included fidelity. His first wife, Neil, later admitted in her memoir that Steve's affairs were constant and brutal. But it wasn't just casual hookups. He carried on long-term secret relationships even while being married. Hollywood insiders whispered that some producers kept female co-stars away from him to avoid scandal. But McQueen thrived on danger, even if it meant blowing up his personal life. McQueen wasn't just difficult, he was combustible. Directors feared him, co-stars tolerated him, and producers walked on eggshells. His most infamous feud was with Paul Newman during the filming of The Towering Inferno. Both were megastars, and both demanded top billing. McQueen insisted on having the exact same number of lines as Newman, counted down to the word. But this wasn't an isolated case. On The Great Escape, tensions ran high between McQueen and the film's director, John Sturges. McQueen even walked off the set when he felt his character wasn't getting enough screen time. He came back only after the script was rewritten to boost his scenes. And then there was Yul Brynner. While filming The Magnificent Seven, McQueen reportedly tried to steal every scene, using props, flashy movements, and even distracting background gestures to draw the camera's eye. Brynner was so furious that he reportedly had a clause written into his contract preventing McQueen from upstaging him again. These weren't just artistic disagreements, they were full-blown battles of ego. But in McQueen's mind, he wasn't being difficult, he was just refusing to be overshadowed. And that mindset left scorched trails across every set he touched. For all his charisma, McQueen harbored deep insecurities. Fame didn't heal his childhood wounds, it only hid them. Abandoned by his father and abused by his stepfather, he grew up with a chip on his shoulder and a desperate need for control. That trauma translated into a volatile personality. He was obsessed with privacy, even paranoid at times. He had people followed. He tapped phones. He demanded control over his scripts and refused to be managed. He was also addicted, not just to fame, but to women, alcohol, and speed. His drug use was whispered about in studio hallways, but never made public at the time. Insiders say he could switch from charming to violent in seconds. His jealousy was legendary. He once threatened a man at gunpoint for flirting with his wife. And yet, McQueen remained one of the highest-paid actors of the 60s and 70s. How? Because he knew how to sell the myth. He built an image of rugged independence and masculine cool that fans couldn't resist. But behind closed doors, he was crumbling. Fame gave him everything, except peace. By the time McQueen hit his peak, he was obsessed with having the final say. He negotiated script approval, wardrobe decisions, even his character's dialogue. On Bullet, he demanded full control over the iconic car chase sequence, and got it. That scene made film history. But the cost? Crew members described him as intense and difficult. His control issues extended to his co-stars too. He reportedly had female co-stars fired for outshining him or refusing his advances. On Le Mans, a film he championed, McQueen was in total control, and it flopped. The production was chaotic, the script was weak, and the studio nearly abandoned it. Still, McQueen refused to compromise. To him, control wasn't just about power, it was about survival. He never trusted Hollywood, and he certainly never trusted people. His obsession with being in charge wasn't ego, it was fear. Fear of losing relevance, fear of being betrayed, and most of all, fear of not being enough. That fear cost him friendships, careers, and eventually his health. By the late 1970s, McQueen had retreated from the spotlight. He bought a ranch in Santa Paula, California, and tried to build a quieter life. But even in seclusion, he couldn't escape his demons. He kept a massive gun collection, surrounded himself with dogs, and limited his contact with the outside world. Friends said he was preparing for war. He became obsessed with conspiracy theories and the idea that someone, maybe even the government, was out to get him. He also took up flying, collecting vintage planes and motorcycles, perhaps as a final form of escape. But the ranch wasn't peaceful. It was a bunker. His second marriage, to Ollie McGraw, collapsed under the weight of his mistrust and temper. Those final years were lonely ones. He stopped taking acting roles, preferring the company of his engines and paranoia. Hollywood had moved on, and McQueen was no longer the king. In 1979, McQueen began experiencing shortness of breath and fatigue. Doctors diagnosed him with pleural mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer caused by asbestos exposure. The news hit hard. McQueen, once the indestructible action star, was now battling a terminal illness. Instead of traditional treatment, he pursued controversial alternative therapies. He traveled to clinics in Mexico, trying everything from Laetrile injections to coffee enemas. The media hounded him, but he refused to speak publicly about his diagnosis. He didn't want sympathy, he wanted control. His condition worsened rapidly, and surgery became his last resort. On November 7, 1980, Steve McQueen died in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, from a heart attack after undergoing surgery to remove a large tumor. He was just 50 years old. The king of cool was gone, but not forgotten. Hollywood never really knew what to do with Steve McQueen. On one hand, he was box office gold. Every movie he touched turned into a hit. On the other, he was a nightmare to manage. Studios loved the money he brought in, but they feared the fallout that came with him. He was known to delay shoots, fight with directors, and storm off set if he didn't get his way. And yet, producers kept calling. Why? Because Steve McQueen had something nobody else did: presence. He didn't need big speeches or dramatic monologues. His silence said more than most actors could in a page of dialogue. And audiences were obsessed. His mere presence on a poster could sell out theaters. Executives hated his attitude, but they loved his numbers. This paradox followed him throughout his career. When Papillon was being cast, many thought the film was too serious, too dramatic for McQueen's action-focused image. But he proved them wrong and pulled off one of the best performances of his life. He was impossible to predict, and Hollywood hates what it can't control. But they tolerated him, even idolized him, because deep down, everyone wanted to be Steve McQueen. He represented a freedom few dared to chase. And in an industry built on image, he had something real, raw, flawed, but magnetic. Steve McQueen left behind more than just a film legacy. He left behind a mystery. Fans remember him for the fast cars, the rebellious roles, the effortless style. But behind the myth was a man who fought every day to outrun his past. His secret affairs, explosive tempers, and desperate need for control weren't just flaws. They were scars. Scars from a childhood filled with pain and a life lived too fast. And while the tabloids focused on the glamour, the real story was always more complicated. That's what makes Steve McQueen so endlessly fascinating. He wasn't perfect, he was human. And maybe that's why we still can't stop talking about him.